Hi, welcome to What If I Told You, the child abuse prevention training presented by Adams County Children's Advocacy Center. Here at Adams County CAC, we work to prevent child abuse and to help child survivors and their families heal from the trauma of abuse. As we continue this work, we believe it is vitally important to work towards stopping child abuse in our community. That is the goal of today's training. Some of the information you may learn today could be emotionally difficult for you, and we want to be sensitive to that. So if at any point you need to take a break, feel free to, and then you can always rejoin us when you're ready. As we move through this presentation, I just ask that you keep children you know in mind. So think of 10 kids you know, whether they are your children, grandchildren, children in your neighborhood, in your community groups. Just keep them in mind as we are working through this today. We at the CAC believe that everyone deserves to live in a community where children are safe and families are strong. Experts believe that when 5% of adults learn about child abuse prevention, that is a tipping point in reducing child abuse in that community. Through today's training, you are working to become part of our community's 5%. Adverse childhood experiences are traumatic events that happen in a child's life. You may hear these referred to as ACEs. These can include physical, sexual, and/or emotional abuse, neglect, having an incarcerated family member, having a family member struggling with mental health, having a family member struggling with substance abuse issues, witnessing domestic violence, having a caregiver go through separation or divorce, and the death of a parent. When children experience ACEs, they are left with lasting effects throughout their entire lifetime. The higher number of ACEs a child experiences, the higher likelihood of negative outcomes across their life, even into adulthood. Having an ACE score of 1 increases the likelihood of a child experiencing PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, chronic health problems, poverty, and early death. Having an ACE score of 4 or more can lead to being 4 times more likely to abuse substances, being 3 times more likely to suffer from chronic depression, being 3 times more likely to have issues with employment, being 2 times more likely to have serious financial issues, being 2 times more likely to have heart disease, and being 2 times more likely to have a stroke. Having an ACE score of 6 or more can lead to a shorter life expectancy by 20 years. The children visiting our center have an average ACE score of 5.95. While that information may seem very discouraging, we know that children are incredibly resilient and can recover from traumatic events. There are 5 main steps to protecting children in our community from abuse. These include learning the facts, minimizing opportunity, talking about it, recognizing the signs, and reacting responsibly. For learning the facts, it is important to know the prevalence of child abuse and how it can occur. 1 in 10 children are sexually abused, and over 90% of children who are abused know their abuser in some sort of close, trusting relationship. When we are making choices about children's safety, we need to use reality and facts to guide us making those choices, rather than just passive trust. Across Pennsylvania, abuse does happen. In 2020, there were 4,452 substantiated reports of child abuse. 61% of those involved girls, and 39% of those involved boys. 45% of those were sexual abuse, 44% were physical abuse, 9% were physical neglect, 4% were medical neglect, and 1% of cases were emotional abuse. There was less than 0.5% considered to be other or unknown, which just means the person making that report was unsure about what abuse was happening. In 2021, 38,013 cases of suspected child abuse were reported across the state. 2,098 cases were of re-abuse. 17,742 cases were of children ages 0 to 8. 20,195 were for children ages 9 to 17. 5,036 cases were substantiated, so they were considered to have been valid. 325 of those cases were re-abuse. 2,753 children were ages 0 to 8, and 609 of those children were 9 through 17. About 14 out of every 1,000 children in Pennsylvania becomes a victim to abuse. 192,592 children were provided in-home services through local county agency to ensure safety and well-being in their own home instead of having to move to a different home. But what about Adams County, our own community? In 2021, 364 reports of suspected child abuse were made. 26 of those reports were re-abuse. 179 children involved in those cases were ages 0 to 8, and 185 were ages 9 through 17. 61 cases of child abuse were substantiated in Adams County in 2021, 10 of which were re-abuse. And this means that 16 out of every 1,000 children in Adams County were reported as victims, which is higher than the state average. 1,403 children were provided in-home services through the local county agency to ensure safety and well-being in their own home instead of having to move to another home. The second step in preventing child abuse is to minimize the opportunity for abuse to happen. We want to eliminate or reduce isolated one-on-one situations with adults whenever possible. We want to make sure we're screening those who care for children in terms of background checks, in-person interviews, and making sure those interviews focus on boundaries with children, as well as obtaining personal and professional references and making sure that they have attended a prevention training. We talk about this because it is important to know people who sexually abuse children often become friendly with potential victims and their families by participating in family activities, earning trust, and gaining alone time with children. Sometimes this could be referred to as grooming. In terms of minimizing opportunity, you also want to make sure that we are monitoring the internet and smartphone use of children and teens. Adults can use this to lure and groom children and engage kids in an area where it is easier to engage them. When monitoring this, you want to make sure that you're engaging your children, creating rules around internet and smartphone use and how they can become safer so that they are engaged in the process and more likely to follow those rules. We also talk about professional codes of conduct for organizations working with children. These are important pieces of information for organizations to have and to abide by. They describe how staff, volunteers, and older youth will interact and conduct themselves with children. It should be made available to caregivers or posted on the organization's website or available in public areas of the organization. Staff members, volunteers, and older youth with the organization should receive an annual review of the code of conduct so that they know it. You have the right to ask for your organization's code of conduct, review it, understand it, and ask any questions about it. Some examples of appropriate interactions that may be listed in a code of conduct include verbal praise, encouragement, and acknowledgement, Asking permission to touch, even for necessary reasons. So this could be a pat on the shoulder, a high five, a handshake, or even in medical instances where an adult may need to touch a child to help them. And they should always include warmth and kindness in all interactions with children. Some inappropriate interactions would include isolated one-on-one interactions, risque jokes or profanity, favoritism, gifts, or photographing individual children. And it would also include private interactions with a child through the phone, internet, or outside of that specific program's activities. Step number 3 is to talk about it. And I know this could be difficult or feel awkward, but it is so important. We know that people who sexually abuse children exploit their innocence around their body, personal boundaries, and sex. In fact, they often specifically target children who do not have the skills to talk about those things. They use that lack of knowledge to keep them silent, shamed, and compliant. Talking about personal safety and sex creates a protective bond between a parent and child, increases their confidence, and instills knowledge that makes them less vulnerable. Other adults in a child's life can also help find creative ways to teach body safety. Things to talk to your child about include age-appropriate topics surrounding their bodies, sex, and boundaries. So you may not have the same conversation with a 5-year-old that you would with a 16-year-old. It should be tailored for that child specifically. You also want to make sure that you tell them they can come to you no matter what happened, and you will support them. Talk to them about how secrets can be harmful. Adults should never ask a child to keep a secret, and if they do, your child should be able to tell you. And also make sure that your children know that they can and should trust their gut feelings about other people. Step number 4 includes recognizing the signs. So changes in behavior or mood are usually the most common signs of abuse. Some of these could be too perfect behavior, where a child does their best to be perfect. It could also include things on the other end of the spectrum, like withdrawal or fear, depression, unexplained anger, and rebellion. Sometimes a child could have marks, bruising, injuries, or other physical problems, such as anxiety, chronic stomach pain, or headaches. Things like nightmares and bedwetting might happen. Failing grades, bullying, being bullied, fire setting, running away, and self-harm are also signs that something is going on. However, not all the time do physical signs happen. And so that is something to keep in mind. With sexual abuse, physical signs are not always common. However, things like bruising, bleeding, redness or bumps, or scabs around the mouth and genitals could indicate some type of sexual abuse. Frequent urinary tractions, especially in young children, are also a potential sign. A red flag would also include sexual behavior and language that are not age appropriate or that a child of that age should not yet know about. If you notice these signs, it does not immediately mean that abuse has occurred, but it should be a reason to explore what is happening in that child's life. And if you are asking them about what's happening, we should always do so cautiously and patiently. If you notice signs, especially physical marks or injuries, the information needs to be reported immediately so that the child can speak with and possibly be examined by a professional. And finally, we have react responsibly. There are 3 situations where we need to react to child abuse. One being a child discloses directly to us, another being that we discover the abuse ourselves, and a third being that we have reason to suspect that the abuse has occurred. But why is how we react so important? If the child has told you, it means they trust you enough to tell you. They've overcome fear, shame, and secrecy, which is a big achievement and shows a lot of resiliency on their part. Our reaction can help the child remain calm and comfortable during disclosure without any additional feelings of guilt, shame, or embarrassment. Reacting responsibly includes giving the child attention, compassion, and support, and believing them. Being patient with them as they're explaining what happened without prying for too many details. Gathering general details of who, what, when, and where, but leaving specific in-depth details to the professionals so that they can gather that information in a safe, trauma-informed manner. If the child won't tell you all of that information, that's okay. Support them for what they have been willing to tell you. Try your best to not overreact with anger, shame, embarrassment, sorrow, or pity. Keeping a calm demeanor can help the child recognize that this is serious but can be taken care of and may help them feel more calm about the situation. Report this information that you've received to Childline, and the number is on your screen. However, if you believe the child is in immediate danger, call 911 first and then report to Childline. Child advocacy centers have been created to help ease the process of the child abuse investigation. CACs are child-focused programs that include professionals from multiple disciplines to form one investigative team. The disciplines include the district attorney's office, law enforcement, children and youth services, victim witness, medical services, mental health services, and sometimes even cultural services. But why are CACs so important? Prior to CACs existing, a child might have gone through a similar scenario such as this. They disclose to a teacher, who then tells the principal. The child has to retell the principal, who also involved the school nurse, the guidance counselor, so the child tells them as well, and the child is examined by the school nurse for any injuries. Someone from the school staff makes a Childline report, which means that children and youth and law enforcement have now become involved. The child has to retell their story or their situation to the police officer. They are taken to the hospital, and there they retell the situation to the nurse, the doctor, and hospital social worker about what happened to them. And they are then re-examined for any injuries. The child then meets with the children and youth investigator and retells them what happened. As the case moves on, the child retells their situation to a lawyer and might have to disclose it in court. And then a child might be referred to a therapist, but might not be. And at the end of all of this, the child has told at least 10 people what has happened to them. They've had 2 physical exams and have been offered little to no support throughout the process. However, with CACs in place, this is now what the general process looks like. The child discloses to a teacher. That teacher makes the Childline report. CYS investigator becomes involved, and the police might also become involved. The CYS investigator ensures for safety of the child and refers them to a CAC. The CAC reaches out to the family and begins offering support right away. The child arrives at the CAC with their non-offending caregiver. An advocate from the CAC talks with the caregiver without the child present, while the child tells their experience to one forensic interviewer. While that forensic interview is happening, law enforcement and children and youth observe from another room, so they get the information but are not asking the child to disclose more than once. The child can be examined on site by a sexual assault nurse examiner if they choose and consent to that. The child can also be referred to a therapist at the CAC or another outside provider if the family chooses that that's the right path for them. And the CAC advocate continues to offer support to the family even after they have left our center. The Adams County Children's Advocacy Center is a community where children are safe, families are strong, and our child victims become children again. Our guiding beliefs are that the intervention system must be sensitive to the needs of abused children and their families and meet their needs by respecting the uniqueness of each child and family. Child abuse is a community problem. No single agency, individual, or discipline alone has the necessary skills, knowledge, or resources to provide the assistance needed by children and families. The combined wisdom and professional knowledge of child protective services, law enforcement, prosecutors, civil legal aid offices, medical providers, mental health providers, and victim advocates will result in a more complete understanding of case issues and provide the most effective response possible. At Adams County Children's Advocacy Center, we continue to improve and expand the services we are able to offer children and families of our community. While many of our services are specifically directed toward children who have suffered from some type of abuse, that being the forensic interviewers, medical exam, mental health services, and victim advocacy, we do have services geared towards other populations as well. Our prevention education starts in schools and connects with our community outreach efforts to reach children and adults throughout Adams County. Our book club, inner child exploration series, and speaker series are open to the public for any community member to attend and learn more about the effects of child abuse, parenting, and empowerment. So after learning all of this information about how to prevent child abuse, what do? How can you make a difference? You can invest in the opportunity to set children on a path toward a brighter tomorrow and a community that is healthier, stronger, and whether that is through investing your time, financial donations, or material donations. You can talk to the children in your life about safety regarding their body, online interactions, and what to do if something does happen. You can let the children in your life know you are a safe adult that they can rely on. Make sure that you are reporting child abuse to Childline when you see it or suspect it, keeping in mind that you only need to suspect abuse. You do not need to investigate or confirm that the abuse has happened. You can volunteer at a local youth serving organization, and you can support our outreach efforts by joining our book club, coming to our in-person events, or attending our speaker series sessions. Thank you for becoming part of Adams County's 5% of Adults Preventing Child Abuse. You can contact us at any time if you have questions, concerns, or want to get involved. All of our contact information is on the screen in front of you, including our social media and websites as well. Thank you so much.